What they prophesied did happen, only not in the expected measure or scope. In other words, in the same way that the prophesied return of the exiles did happen, but not in the expected measure or scope. And in the same way that the prophesied rebuilding of the temple did take place, but not with the expected glory. In the very same way the Messiah did come and inaugurate the new covenant, just as was prophesied, but not with the expected glory or scope. So as I wrote in my Jeremiah commentary, just as the return from exile did take place after 70 years as prophesied, although not with the expected glory, so also the Messianic era began and the new covenant was established, only not with the expected glory. But the historic event serves as the deposit and down payment of the future event, the former guaranteeing the latter, with the return from Babylon in the late 6th century BC serving as the first coming home, while the final eschatological end-time return will serve as the second coming home, similar to the Messiah's first and second comings. So also with the establishing of the new covenant. It did begin as promised. The days are coming oracles cannot be pushed into the eschaton in their entirety. Now, that was commentary writing, but just to explain. When the prophet's saying the days are coming, the days are coming, the days are coming, it had to have at least some application in the coming centuries. You couldn't stick it all 2,500 years later. It just doesn't work. Some had to apply to the Jews who returned from exile and the things that happened while the second temple was standing. But the new covenant was inaugurated touching a much smaller group of people than expected and still not in its full force. When the Messiah returns, the promise will reach its ultimate fulfillment. Thus, the realization of the new covenant will follow the same pattern outlined in Zechariah 9 and 10, growing from humble beginnings until at the end it encompasses the entire world. Now, you can read all of your notes here in greater depth, and then later in the afternoon, again, we'll take some questions. So I gave you some samples here from the Jeremiah commentary and from Volume 4 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. But here's why this is so important. I've been studying these passages and these concepts for a few decades when this opened up with total, or I should say greater clarity to me than I'd seen before. When we are constantly told Jesus cannot be the Messiah because when the Messiah comes, there'll be peace on earth, there'll be this, there'll be this, there'll be this, there'll be this, as the prophet said. And we say, well, we're in a transition age. He did the things he had to do before the second temple was destroyed. He is in process of continuing his work through the world, and in the end, it will culminate. It's on a logical progression, reaching its destiny, reaching its goal. They could challenge us, well, where does that happen with other scripture? All of the prophecies here in Jeremiah, all of these glorious prophecies, same principle. Either he's a false prophet because it didn't happen when it was supposed to happen, or it began, but not in the full scope that was expected. Yes, the Messianic era began, not with universal peace on earth, rather with a dying Messiah rising from the dead. Yes, the glorious return from exile began just as the prophets declared, but not with masses coming with a road and highway in the wilderness and the earth seeing the glory of God, but with a number of exiles coming back to the land. Yes, they did rebuild the temple. Yes, the new covenant was established and inaugurated by the Messiah. Yes, it all happened, but in seed form, in earnest, in a deposit, in a beginning way. We are experiencing the realities of the new covenant, but the way Jeremiah prophesied, ultimately the whole earth, or all the Jewish people, will all know God, and you won't have to teach and instruct. We've experienced the seed, the reality, the knowledge of forgiveness of sins, and people come to know God, and in that sense, you don't have to teach them or instruct them or tell them it's happened. They know they've been changed. And yet, in another sense, it hasn't fully come to pass yet. So either Jeremiah, Ezekiel are false prophets. Forget messianic prophecy. There are other prophetic declarations for the nation. They're either false prophets or there is a process of fulfillment. And the same as it happened with the return from exile, the exact same way it applies to the Messiah. Sometimes in Jewish commentaries, they'll have this phrase, "V'hamaskil yavin," and the wise will understand. You dig, you search, you look at it, you'll understand the depth of that principle. I'm going to begin to open up this next subject, though, and look at some of the specific challenges to the messiahship of Yeshua. And we looked at some of the clearest passages being in the book of Isaiah about the servant of the Lord, Hebrew Eved, the servant of the Lord. passages we looked at earlier from Isaiah 42 and 49. The 50th chapter is another one about the servant's suffering. And then the end of 52 through 53, all talking about this servant of the Lord. The traditional Jewish response is, yeah, but that's got nothing to do with Jesus. Those are national promises to Israel. They refer to Israel as a nation, Israel as a whole. And they would say, just read through Isaiah 40 to 55, and you'll see the servant of the Lord is always Israel. Let's just examine that. Many of the best insights I've gotten through the years have been by means of a concordance. The theme on which I ultimately wrote my doctoral dissertation on Hebrew and Semitic words for healer, healing, in particular the root rapha in the Hebrew Bible in the ancient Near East, that came to me, some of the insights, the scriptures began to open. I was on my knees praying about some issues relative to God's healing with my Hebrew concordance open, looking at verses when I began to look, oh, look at the usage. Look at that. So this is not one of these mysterious things where we have to wonder. Even if you just have an English concordance and take the word servant or servants and look it up, or just read through. If all you can do is read through in an English Bible and mark each time it occurs, you don't have to speculate. Sometimes I'll be teaching our students to say, okay, well, what happened in that passage? I think it was, well, if I remember, well, I said, tell you what, there's a great biblical interpretation principle called look it up. You don't need to speculate or wonder or guess. Look it up. Read it. I would be thrilled beyond words if traditional Jews would simply read through the Hebrew Scriptures, asking the question, could this be Yeshua? I don't want anyone to just believe my argument. I want people to study and look and read with an open heart before God and see where the truth leads them. So, servant of the Lord in Isaiah. Servant of the Lord, Hebrew Eved, is mentioned a total of 17 times in Isaiah 40 to 51. I mention this because 40 to 51 immediately precedes 52, and it's 52:13 to 53:12, which is the great battleground. I mentioned some of the anti-missionary material early on, the multi-tape series of Rabbi Tovia Singer, where he deals with this. He actually takes 2 whole CDs to deal with the subject of Isaiah 53. That's how big an issue it was there. If you look down on your notes, challenges to Isaiah 52:13 to 53:12 from the Jews for Judaism website, look at all these objections. Down onto the next page, why it can't be Jesus. Now, these are done, I'm not laughing at them, these are done with great sincerity of heart. And I know some of the people that work on this website are very sincere people and knowledgeable in different ways. I'm not laughing at them. I'm just saying it's so amazing to see how many issues have to be raised, how many potential problems there are that you never knew existed, having read the passage over and over and over and over. You didn't realize why it couldn't be the person. It's almost like if you're a married man, I've been married now 30 years, here's my wife sitting next to me, and someone's going to explain to me why that's actually not my wife. Give me various proofs, and listen, I know my wife. That's my wife. The same way, 2 CDs to try to show why this cannot be Jesus. That's one of the examples of nothing plus nothing plus nothing equals nothing, no matter how sincerely it's done.